Welcome to the Altered Moments podcast. Thanks for tuning in and making a choice to see God is still alive and at work changing people's lives. This is a show filled with stories of grit and gratitude to inspire you to never give up, no matter what comes your way. And now, here's your host, Kimberly Stevens.
Welcome to Altered Moments, where we aim to encourage you to never give up on this journey of navigating pain and discovering hope. In this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into what it means to bring our circumstances to the altar of God, allowing Him to work in our lives. When we're faced with tough times, we have a choice. And that choice is we can walk around in bitterness and hold on to our pain and our troubles, or we can surrender them at the altar and allow God to not only change our circumstances, but to change us as well. On each episode, you're going to hear stories of grace, gratitude, and grit. And I'm really excited to bring our guest, Jackie Dighans, to this stage. Welcome, Jackie.
Hey, glad
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Yes, so happy to be here.
So I have a couple details that I have to spill, and then I'm going to let you fill them in, because the second I tell one in particular, people are going to be very curious. You've been married for how many years now?
32.
32, but you and your husband have brought 10 amazing children into this world.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that, because that is highly unusual in this day and age.
Right. Yeah. And it wasn't my plan, right? As my husband and I got married, I was an overwhelmed mom as we went into it of 3 kids. So we had them together, and I found myself overwhelmed and seeking joy actually with my family. And about that time, God introduced me to someone who had 6 kids, and I read a book about a mom of 10 kids, and
Wow.
I felt like God was calling us to raise a large family. So I was like, okay, God, I'm willing. I asked my husband what he thought, and we decided we would take one at a time. And that's how God brought them, one at a time, about every other year.
Wow.
So I was pregnant or nursing for 20 years.
Oh my goodness.
It's been a journey of just growth and learning to let go and love and continuing on my journey. I still have 5 kids at home, and I'm homeschooling them again this year. After 7 years, we put 7 in the school system, and now we get to bring them back home. So I'm thankful for sure.
Wow. And you're coming to us from
Montana.
I almost said Wyoming, and I thought, no, it's Montana.
Yeah. Yeah. I was born here and have lived here all but around, I think it was 10 years I was in Idaho. So.
And do you have snow on the ground yet? I have to ask.
No, thankfully, no. Yeah. Yeah. So we've had a beautiful fall, though. It's been colorful and nice, 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s weather, which is perfect.
Which is winter in Florida.
Oh, yeah. See that? Yeah, that's a whole different feel, isn't it?
Winter coat weather for me.
Yeah. Wow.
So in addition to homeschooling 5 kids, you are also a covenant life coach. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about what that means specifically. I know that's different than being a coach for a different platform. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as God called me into coaching, I had never heard of coaching. And I listened to a couple of interviews, and I was like, okay, I see what you're saying here, and covenant life coaching is, for me, this is what I'm called to do. Help leaders align with the covenant of God, the word of God, so that they can live triumphant from a place of rest. And I help with throwing off weights and sin that entangle so that they can run their race, and forgetting the past so that they can reach the goal of the high call of God. And so I'm thankful for that opportunity to help, as God taught me in my home, just amongst all my children, chores. My husband and I always ran a business ourselves, and he taught me, and I have learned and am continuing to learn how to live in a place of rest, just trusting him through all of the trials and things that come up. So thankful.
So I love that you're sharing this and talking about this, because when I think of my own experience, I only have 2 kids. And when they were home and they were in high school and I was the reverse taxi driver and I was driving them places and giving them money, right? Reverse taxi driver. I just found that it was so not restful.
Mhm.
And to hear you talk about still having 5 children at home and the word rest in the same couple of seconds is pretty mind blowing to me.
Mhm. It's an amazing place. And, even sometimes my husband is like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, we do get to live, like Psalm 91 says, in the secret place of the Most High. If we'll just quiet ourselves, and God took me through several things in life to get me to the place where I can live peacefully from that place. But I remember thinking, as I was raising my kids, and I had a choice if I was going to do it with anxiety and full of fear and stressed out and worry and all the things, or was I going to make the process and the journey of life matter more than just focusing on the end result? Like, okay, this is what I want my kids to do. This is where I want to get today. And it
Yeah.
was more like the process of getting there had to matter. And so that caused me to go, okay, then I've got to change the way I'm being in my day. So it looked like, okay, I'm not going to yell anymore. I'm going to quiet my voice instead of raise it. And that's what I did. And seriously, we have a fairly big yard and area around. When I was needing to call the kids, I couldn't yell. It's like I could not get my voice to raise. So I asked my husband, would you get us a bell that I can ring
Oh
when
my
I
gosh. Wow.
call the kids? So now I've got past some of that, being able to um, raise it when I need to for different things, but not from an angry place, not from an overwhelmed place, but from just a firm, like, okay, we got to do this way or whatever. So, but that's really what had to matter for me. Otherwise, I know I wouldn't be here today talking about this if I continued in anxiety through it all. I would have been a
Yeah.
mess, because there's always something happen, even with 2 kids in the home.
I
There's
can't
always
even imagine. Yes, of
time.
course.
And so, yeah,
Do you address this in your books?
yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
good. I'm putting them on the screen now. And I know you have 3 books. One is called Covered, Living in Triumph While Going Through Trials. And one is called Covered on a Deeper Level, Living in Triumph While Going Through Trials Covered, bonus material. And one is called What If You Believed? And which one's your favorite?
Which, um, I like the covered book because it covers so much. I share testimony and then just what God taught me, and there's a lot of scripture in there that God taught me to believe over what I was going through. And so that's a very personal book, as far as this is what God taught me throughout my life, the different circumstances that would arise. And the covered bonus material is a study guide. It's not a book to be done on it. It goes
Okay.
with the covered book so that ones can go through it individually on a deeper level or with a group. And
Nice.
I'm getting to go through it again with a group soon here, actually in a church in my town, which I'm super excited about. And then the What If You Believed book is a devotional style. So it's one that is like a quicker, well, they're both quick reads, but this one, you can just take bits and pieces of, okay, what if I believe this verse? How will my life change? Because really, if we're actually believing the word, we live out our beliefs. So then our lives will change according to what we've said. I'm going to stand on this and believe it. And so that's what that book talks about.
Awesome. I did not mention your website. I'm putting this back up. Jackie's website is livingcoveredbyhim.com. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, the easiest way right now is to find you on our Facebook community, the Altered Moments Facebook community. But on your website as well, is there a spot where people can contact you?
Yeah, they can book a call and contact me through there.
Awesome. Do you want to repeat that website?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. It's livingcoveredbyhim.com.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
So I know you have an altered moment to share with us. And as everyone tells me, it's really hard to pick one altered moment because we all, as followers of Jesus, have many moments where he changes our circumstances and us. But one stood out to you pretty obviously.
Mhm.
So I'm excited for you to talk about it. Um, Give us a little context about what was going on. I know it revolves around your kids and your family, and
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I'd be glad to share that. So as I'm pregnant with my 10th baby, and we had just a few years before shut down a business that we had for about 8 years. And my husband's an entrepreneur and amazing man, but he let stress overcome him and just worry, fear, depression. So he went into a breakdown depression season. And he had a lot of anger throughout our marriage and stuff, and it had also been growing in different ways. But I found myself saying to God, what do you want me to do? Because my husband was safe to be around, but yet there was so much negativity. And like I said, I had 9 kids. I was homeschooling, and I was pregnant with the 10th, and the anger was getting more. I knew it wasn't a righteous place that God wanted us to stay in. And you know how you can almost desperately be saying, God, what do you want me to do? What should I do? And for a little bit, I was doing that, like, God, what do you want me to do? But I wasn't listening.
hmm,
One morning, my husband took the kids to church. So we had always been in church. We were faithful to go weekly and even midweek and all the things. And I stayed home. And it was probably because I was pregnant and just hadn't slept well that night or something. Anyway, I just got really quiet before God and I said, God, I will do whatever you ask me to do. I know you don't want us to stay like this. And all I heard was, pack your bag.
hmm.
And I'm like, okay, as I'm thinking about okay, but I have 9 kids and I'm homeschooling, and we really don't have the money for me to go stay in a hotel or something. And there wouldn't have been family nearby that I could have stayed with really at that point. So I just was like, I don't, how will that, I'm willing to, but how will this work? But he just said quietly to me, don't create all the drama around it. All I said was pack your bag.
Mm.
Okay, so that's what I did. I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this. I knew that if I would have told anyone that God told me that, they would have been like, Jackie, God's not for divorce or, separating, whatever, leaving your family. And so it wasn't a place, not that I had a lot of people to talk to at that point anyway, but they wouldn't have understood. Right.
Right.
And so I packed my bag and I just sat there just praying. And when my husband came home, he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, and it was like specific words. I said, "I can't live this way anymore. This way anymore." And we had a short conversation. And, in previous times, if we would have had a discussion like, a little squabble and one of us needing to leave or something, he would have said, well, it's my house, I'm staying, or something to that effect. But this round, he said, no, I'll go.
Wow.
And so I was like, oh, wow, thank you, Lord. Not that I wanted him to go either, but we had to do something different, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes something has to change so that things can change, so that the situation can shift. So anyway, he packed up his bag, and we had a place out of town that was about an hour out, and it had heat and lights. It didn't have any sewage or water there, so that's why it wasn't really a place I would have gone pregnant and that far out of town. So he could go out there and just be with God and refresh, whatever he needed to do. And that's what he did for like 3 to 4 days. And when he came home, things had shifted just enough.
Mm.
It got us on the track of restoration. And about, I don't know if it was around a year later, something like that, he went into the oil field for work. And that caused him to need to be gone more than he was home for a year and a half.
Wow.
And our kids were newer to the public school system at that time because we put 7 of them in for 7 years.
Wow.
So I was dealing with that new lifestyle of being in the school system and running kids and helping them get used to it and all that. And I remember just being so thankful for that time, even though it was a super hard time. And anyway, just seeing what God was doing for us as he brought my husband away for a bit, so that he could be refreshed and then also the family could be refreshed. And you know how when you're missing someone, the heart grows fonder. And so God used that to help myself and the family miss my husband, miss him being around, but yet it also gave him a chance to refresh and also miss us. And so it was a beautiful thing, even though it was really hard. And I want to share just a little clip about a vision God gave me when my husband was gone. So a couple of my kids, I had kids in the high school, the junior high school, the middle school, and like
Gosh, yes.
I even had one in preschool. So I was like, okay, God, we were like in 5 schools. And it some of, they all took it a little different going in there. It wasn't super easy, but thankfully they did well, and God gave me a word that they would excel and be a light. And so I stood on that. No matter any struggles that came, I said, no, they're excelling and being a light here. That's what God said. But as I was dealing with a son that was struggling, I sat down on the floor in my room, and I remember telling my husband, because he seemed to still be struggling a little bit when we would talk on the phone, and I'm like, I'm trying to help the children, be settled here. We're gonna have to talk a little less so that, anyway. So as I sat down on the floor in my room, just crying and just saying, God, it feels like I have nothing physical to hold on to anymore. And he showed me a vision of a dock. And it's actually the picture on my book here, the What If You Believed book. So,
That's cool.
yeah, so a dock. And it was waving with the water. And I was on it, and I was like, God, it feels like there's nothing physical to hold on to. Feels like I'm going to fall where I'm at, And he said, well, that's exactly where I want you, with nothing physical to hold on to. And what that can look like, and what it looked like in my life, was not being attached to physical things. Like in my home, a lot of things were broken as we were raising the kids, like dishes. And I had to, you couldn't have all the collectibles or things, which I didn't love anyway. But okay, I'm not attached to things. I also had a dad that passed away when I was 12, and then a sister that passed when I was 29, and she was 32.
Oh.
And so I remember when my sisters and I were picking the things that my dad had left, just some of his things. I knew that I didn't want to fight with my sisters for it. I knew it wasn't worth, physical things weren't worth that. So letting go of that, letting go of people and the attachment to them in an unhealthy way. And I got to learn that through my dad passing a sister, and then with my husband gone. It was like, I can't hold on to him either. And then even the way my kids are behaving, sometimes that affects the way we feel or we are. So I learned not to let that move me, or, that be something that I was attached to. And we've even had a son that's chosen not to walk with our family right now. And just being okay, even though one's chosen to walk away at the moment.
Wow.
So in that space of those, I just wanted to share some things that others might think of. Okay, yeah, I can let go of that. I don't need this. God's like, that's exactly where I want you. And he said, now I'm going to ask you to step off this dock. And I looked around and I thought, and I said to God, I'm like, well, it feels like I'm going to fall where I'm at. So I may as well obey and step off. And when I stepped off that dock, it felt firmer there. It wasn't like I sunk down in the water. It was like I was on the rock, my firm foundation, living in Christ, not being attached to the things of the world that are false security, but living in him and being willing to put all in God, not having one foot in the world and one foot with God. That makes us unstable, but being all in for him. And so that was a beautiful realization, and just comfort and security, knowing that I'm safe in him and him alone, and he is enough. So yeah, so that's that's my altered moment. And I might have kind of shared a couple of them there with that vision, which was amazing, but it all kind of went together.
So, and your husband came back and he was refreshed because of that shift that
Mhm.
then allowed him to grow and change
Yes.
and
Mm.
come back restored.
Yeah.
Um, but I have a question for you about that doc.
Mhm.
And you said that you stepped off. What did that physically look like? Or what did that mean? I know it was more than sitting on your floor and seeing a vision. There was something that you shifted in your heart,
Mhm.
or what did that look like?
Yeah, it was like another step of just letting go of expectations of um, things of this world that are not secure. It's like nothing is secure except for in him. So it allowed me to live freer, to live in a place of peace and joy, almost like the words in the word that talk about the scriptures that say we are not of this world, we're in it but not of it.
Mhm.
And almost living from that seated place in Christ, heaven to earth, and that's what it felt like. It was like, okay, I'm free now. I'm not relying on anyone to make me happy. I have the joy of the Lord. You know, it it was just a super free place, even though it was one of the hardest times of my life.
So did you make a conscious decision that whatever that thing was that was really in your face and hurting you at that moment, that you were just going to turn a different direction?
Right.
Or did you, yeah, what did that look like?
Mhm.
For someone who's in that place that
Yeah.
knows they need to step off, what do they do practically?
Yeah. Practically, it would be going, okay, what is holding me back? What's that thing that I'm hanging on to, that it's almost like a thread, that you're like,
Mhm.
"Hmm, I'm still relying on this. Like, I'm still relying on that my kids will approve of me, or, you know, that this will be there. Like my coffee will be there in the morning. What if it's not? You know, Getting to that place where it's like, if all of that went away, I'm still okay. And
Wow.
that thought of, just like the word says, we were bought with a price. We are not our own. And it's Christ, it's not I who live, but Christ lives in me. And so, really dropping our own will, our own agenda, and just going, I'm with you, God. I'm just following you. I don't have any other way or purpose than just in you. And God showed me that over and over as I was raising my kids, as I would try to make a plan and then it would fall through.
I can't
And
imagine you only had 10 people or 11 actually to
yeah,
contend with for any decision.
yeah. And I was just like, oh, okay, I don't think I have any plans. Not that I didn't schedule and plan my day, but I really let go of the expectations and I wouldn't be disappointed. I would try to go toward, okay, what does God want me to do instead? Like, oh, we get to be home today, I guess, or, whatever the situation, but really letting go of my own will and agenda in life. Because really, for me, what I was doing, I was making a mess. trying to just flow my own way, And I was tired of that. I'm like, I don't want to have anything to do. And that the verse that comes in on that is, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. So
Mm,
unless the Lord builds the business, the family, the home,
right.
my life, my marriage, whatever it is, we build in vain. And I was like, God, I don't want to do this in vain. I want to do it your way because I know you have the best in mind for me.
Yeah. Our pastor likes to talk about Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, plans for a future and a hope. And sometimes it requires faith. Often, most of the time, it requires faith to trust that, wow,
Mhm.
God has plans for me,
Yeah.
but I don't really know those plans, right? We need our faith to
Mhm.
trust in those plans. But our pastor always adds a little tongue in cheek. He's like, God doesn't reveal all his plans to you because you'll try to help him and you'll make a mess.
That's good.
I think about that a lot when plans don't go exactly the way that I planned them. Um, that God has a bigger plan and he's doing it right.
Mm.
And I'm just learning.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like we can be along for the ride. Like, okay, what are we doing today, Lord? And just, it doesn't mean we don't make plans, but we aren't attached to them. We just make the plans out of what leading we have, because if we're a son of God, daughter of God, we're led by the Spirit of God. It tells us in Romans. And so we can, we're led to make these plans, but if they change, we're going to trust that shift, that God's involved in, okay, we're going this way instead today, you know. And I
Yeah.
want to mention from my what I shared earlier is that if you think about it, God's saying, pack my bag. Well, if I would have told a pastor that God said, pack my bag, a lot of them, not everyone, but a lot of them would have said, I don't think God would tell you that. And if I would have told my mom or a friend, they would have been like, Jackie, wait, you've got 9 kids going on 10. What are you doing? But,
Right.
I'm so thankful because, God showed me to look at Abraham. He asked him to sacrifice his son. What if Abraham would have talked to his pastor or a friend and they would have been, Abraham, God is not about killing, but God asks us to do things. It's out of obedience. Will you obey me? Will you trust even when it doesn't make sense? And all of the different characters in the Old Testament, they had that opportunity to go, am I going to trust God here? Look at Joseph. He sat in prison. He was accused, but then look what God did with his life. So what if we can do the same thing with those as we have a heart of obedience, that we're going, God, okay, I'm going to trust you here. This is what I'm hearing. I'm going to trust you and see what he does. And when I saw him do what he did, I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
And the importance of that, I want to say it's more important because your family was so big, but it's not. The importance of that is a family stayed together, and big, small, a family stayed together.
Yeah.
And sometimes that requires obedience, and often obedience requires grit.
Yeah. Mhm.
And, and we're about grit and gratitude on this podcast.
Yeah.
And Obedience, when I think of obedience, grit comes to mind because it's hard. It's hard to choose something that doesn't make sense or something that may not be exactly what we want.
Mhm.
But if it is in line with God's will and God's scripture, then we do need to find the grit to carry it through.
Yeah, and especially, one of my thoughts during that time was, what if I don't do anything? Then what's going to happen? Am I helping my husband by not saying anything and just letting him continue in anger and that road he was on? Am I doing good to my kids by not saying anything?
Yeah.
By letting them see me just go along with it? I don't think so. I don't think that would have been honoring to God for me to just stay there. Now, there are times when he asks us to stay. That's why for each of us, it's just listening to what he's saying. What is the step?
Mhm. God.
Sometimes it's words. Sometimes I remember asking God, what do I say? This was a little bit before he told me to pack my bag, like weeks or days before when he was in a struggle. I'm like, God, what do I say? And sometimes he would have me say words that I would cover my mouth after I said it, going, did that just come out of my mouth? But it was words from the Spirit, from God, that he's like, you've got to say this to help shift the situation. In Ecclesiastes, it talks about words can be like a goad that like poke and prod, like a prodding cattle is kind of what that picture is, that can help shift. So some of us have to be willing to speak up and say the thing, and I think for me, I was a people pleaser for years. I didn't speak up. I just went along with things, and that didn't get me into a good spot. I grew through it, thankfully, and learned out how to get out of it, but so often we can stay in those places where I'm just going to be quiet and sit here, and God's like, you've got some words to say here.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah. Going back to your comment about how sometimes others don't understand who we are or what we're called to do or what is obedience for us, where we are on our path. And I just wanted to go back to that and talk about how personal God is, in that Joseph's trial, when he was first of all, he was in a hole for quite a while, and then he was sold into slavery, and then he went to prison, and then God chose to bring him to second in charge in the most powerful country in the world.
mhm.
Um, that path was not the same for David, who also became king of the most powerful country. But David took a different path. And David's brothers hated David, um, and judged him, and certainly would never have understood or condoned. And they didn't. When he went to face the giant, just wearing his little, slingshot, and they didn't understand his faith, and that he, at that moment, had to step out in obedience and trust. And a David moment is not the same as a Joseph moment, is not the same as an Abraham moment,
Mhm.
because we serve a God who is personal.
Right. Yeah.
And I love thinking about that, because
Mhm.
when I find myself in a situation, I raised a daughter with citrullinemia, which is essentially an orphan disease.
Mm.
And I did all kinds of insane things. Um, However, I have the most successful person ever born with this disease, as my daughter, who I'm proud to say is named Victoria Faith. And God gave her that name for a reason. And obedience in raising her was taking crazy formulas and combining combinations of foods and doing things that doctors thought I was absolutely crazy for doing, but they were logical and there was no path to follow. And so I followed the one that I was given.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the Victoria path was not the path that, other parents had to follow in order to feed and raise their children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it's so profound, yet extremely simple to think of the God of the universe is so personal that he will give me and you and anyone who cares to ask and listen, he will give them their personal plan and love them in a way, love us, love me, love you, in a way that we need at the moment when we need it.
Right. Yeah. He's so good and so loving and so personal. So thankful for him in my life.
And there we go with the gratitude. So now we've got both of our words. We've got grit, which obedience requires grit. And then when we do come through, gratitude, always.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I know you have some words as a coach that you want to say about all of this. So I'm going to just ask if you have any thoughts that you want to just leave us in the last few moments of our broadcast.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. Yeah, so I guess just in closing is, will you simply obey? Those were the words God gave me as I was walking this out. He's just like, it's simple obedience. Don't wrap the drama around it. Just do the thing that God has said, and don't doubt it. Just, don't try to talk it out with someone. It's probably not something to go talk about because they won't understand, but just simply obey what God is saying, and you will see him be faithful.
Yeah, and that's really what these moments are, altered moments, is no matter what comes our way, if we ask God for eyes to see and ears to hear, he does promise that he will have that conversation with us and reveal our next steps according to his plan, which is a good plan to prosper us and to bring us to a future with hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jackie, for sharing a story that was hard, a story where you had to reach deep down, find your grit and obey. And then thank you for sharing your gratitude as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And thank you to everyone who has been here today and to everyone who will listen on the replay. I wish everyone a wonderful week, and final words always, never give up. Never give up. Until next time.
We appreciate you for tuning in to this episode of Altered Moments. To get updates and new episodes, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you enjoyed today's show, please leave us a review. Until next time, remember, never give up.